we spoke of less and scaling and how scaling works for the unicorns and hypergrowth companies. While Bob has to say about build your own scaling framework. So I'm very curious to learn what that will be. And without any further ado, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Right. Welcome, guys. We're almost at the end of the day. So before we start, I'd like you all to stand, please. It's amazing what you can make people do, isn't it? And stretch. I've just increased the blood flow to your brain. You can thank me later. Sit back down. Okay, good. We've woken up again. Yeah, third year running, and this time in person, and it's great to be here. Last two times, you know, it's been looking at people's grey boxes with their cameras switched off, so this is a much more pleasant experience to be speaking in. Today we're going to be talking about some options that you can take away with you today, and as we go through this, I'd like you to try and pick at least one thing, and I'll ask you about this at the end, that as an experiment that you can take away with you and go back into your working environment and try out, because that's what this is all about, right? So, a little bit about me. This is called the boasting slide, right? This is more badges than a Boy Scout. That's not the point of it, really. The point is that I don't care. Whatever works in your context is what works. I've been working for over 17 years with most of the Agile frameworks and methodologies, and I have seen some pain that I'm sure you guys have experienced in your past as well. I'm an enterprise Agile coach in IBM's EMEA Agile Center of Competency, so we get involved with events such as these, with training IBM and clients, providing coaching at all levels of the organization. So that's what I do. As far as today goes, we're going to talk about scaling. How many of you, hands up, are currently in a scaled environment? Okay, so a few of you. How many of you are planning to be scaling in the near future? Okay, so a few of you again. So pertinent conversations. And I have seen some horrendous implementations of Agile at scale. Give you an example. A very large bank in the UK, they decided that they wanted to reorganize all of their workforce, 10,000 people, to be more agile. We want to be more agile. And the first thing they did, the first communication from leaders was, we would like you to get Jira, and we would like you to have a stand-up every day. They didn't explain how to do any of this stuff. They had no training, and they were completely lost. And this thing has happened over and over again with clients that I see year on year. So badly that one client, this was their third implementation of Agile at scale, and they asked me, Bob, please don't use the word Agile. Can we use the word nimble instead? That's not going to solve your problem. Yeah, so the words, yeah, words are important, but that's not the root cause of what's going on. So we are not going to try and reinvent the wheel. I'd like for you guys to get some useful nuggets to take out of this in your scaling journey. Who's in a team? Yeah, lots of people in teams. Great. You might be in a Scrum team, you might be in a Kanban team, some other kind of team. It might be a really good team. It might be a crap team. But you know what's going on. You know what the status quo is. Things go wrong when we scale. We've got this team over here. I've done my work, but in order to complete it, I need you guys to do something as well. So dependency management, critical. Communication between teams, or lack of communication between teams, or communication via documentation, maybe, the worst kind. Handoffs, done my bit, I'm not interested anymore, I will chuck it over the wall of uncertainty, you guys can catch it, and you can carry on down the journey of trying to implement it. And alignment that's been mentioned a few times already on the last talk. How are we supposed to get all our teams aligned on a common mission? So our goal today is to try and answer some of these questions, to try and give you some potential solutions to move forward with. So we'll see what we can do. First question, what the hell is scaling? What are we trying to scale? And that's the first question you should ask yourselves. In your organization, do you mean enabling that structure to work at a really big scale, multi-geographies involved? Are we looking at really big products? Are we looking at, like the previous talk, multi-product delivery? Or are we saying, actually, we want to expand, we want to broaden outside of our traditional IT organization, we want to involve HR, we want to involve legal, marketing. What is it? What is it that you want to try and scale? And the next thing is, why scaling frameworks? A guy who I've collaborated with over the years, Kareem Harbot, he wrote this book recently, The 6 Enablers of Business Agility. So Kareem, if you're watching and you get a lot of orders from Lithuania, you know why. He's saying, and he said this on LinkedIn last week, maybe potentially more value in a set of principles and patterns rather than the frameworks themselves is what you guys should be focusing on. Jürgen this morning was reiterating the same kind of concepts. What are the building blocks for real success in implementing Agile at scale? Craig Larman, co-founder with Baz Fodder of the LESS framework. I went many years ago to one of his first LESS courses, and right at the beginning, and someone was asking him about scaling in general, his response was, don't do it. Which, hey, Craig, we're actually on a course to learn about scaling. Would be good to, maybe have you be a little bit more positive about this. But he's right. Things get much more complicated when we work at scale. We've got decision-making that takes longer, multiple layers in an organization to traverse to get the results that we want. We have flow. How do we optimize for consistency in the flow of delivery? All of that kind of stuff. And how do we actually release the product? A lot more mechanics involved in getting the thing out of the door. So this is painful stuff. And this leads to kind of one of the major concepts behind, do we want to scale effectively, or are we going to experience more pain than we bargained for? The first LESS conference I went to in Amsterdam, 2016, I think, and I was outside, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and I'm standing by the canal, and I'm talking to Jeff McKenna. Jeff McKenna, for those of you who don't know, was the coach on the very first Scrum team back in 1993, so a long time ago. Scrum has been around that long. And he said, forget LESS, forget Scrum and SAFe and all the other frameworks and methodologies that are out there, and just get a big hammer and smash as many silos as you can, because that's what's going to kill you. Siloed organizations, whether they be the functional units in an organization or skill silos on a team, are one of the biggest impediments to us working effectively and releasing stuff and getting it out of the door. Conway's Law. Anybody familiar with this kind of picture, what your organization looks like? Sorry? Oh, right, you're answering me. Yeah, I mean, people are at odds with each other. the actual traditional org chart does not represent how people actually, in real life, communicate with one another. And Conway's Law, which was, I think, written in about 1967, late 60s, by a guy called Mel Conway. And I'll read this out. Organizations who design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. What does that mean? It means, for you guys, if you structure your teams in a certain way, the actual work product they produce will be a reflection of that structure. I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, I was a DBA, and I worked in a DBA team in our ivory DBA tower, working on Oracle databases. We produced beautiful data models that we eventually reluctantly released to the rest of the developers to actually use. And our resultant product, in that case, was a system that had one big database and lots of the channels trying to integrate with that database, access that database in different ways. It was not a holistic product, but it reflected how at the time we were organized. If you look at some website designs, they might look like they're really a reflection of the internal organization, kind of reflecting the org chart, rather than something that addresses user needs. Is this actually helping me get value from my interaction with this product? And if you try and change some of this stuff, that usually means the frozen layer of middle management getting really pissed off because they're afraid for their jobs, and they usually get put in the role of something like an Agile coach maybe instead. But yeah, we want to ensure that we have the best structure possible that's going to support some of those issues we saw earlier around communication, alignment, etc. So Conway's Law, you might think, so what? But what happens is this. A scary picture. That's not a picture of Ruth Mallon. She'd probably kill me if I put that up, but it's nearly Halloween, and this is scary stuff. Because if you have managers who are deciding on how we should structure our teams, then you have managers who have no technical knowledge, potentially, deciding on how we should architect our products. It's a kind of indirect influence on what our product's going to look like, and then what that interaction with our end users is going to actually be represented by that kind of decision. So scary stuff. So bear that in mind. When we're trying to design teams, you need architects involved. You need the teams themselves involved in order to do it effectively. What is our outcome? What is the product that we're trying to develop that's going to address those user needs? Team Topologies. This book is getting a lot of airing today. A lot of guys have spoken about this today, but it's a great book. Matt Skelton, Manuel Paez, that Jürgen this morning, a lot of the unfixed stuff is built upon this Team Topologies book. And how you structure your teams, the main thing that this is addressing is how they communicate between each other. So we've got the 4 different kinds that are illustrated in Team Topologies. If you read the book, which I advise you do, it also talks about how these teams interact with each other. What are the interaction mechanisms? So we got, previous to this, we had feature teams and component teams. Yeah, good and bad. This gives you more options, and it gets you to understand the kind of impact of your decisions on structure. So, you know, very value-aligned teams, almost equating to feature teams, if you like. Teams that support those teams. So Agile coaching teams, DevOps teams, those kinds of facilitation-based teams. We talked about, on Jürgen's talk this morning, the complicated subsystem team. So those true specialists that you really do not have enough of to split across all the teams in your scaled environment. And platform teams, which kind of treat like an API. Yeah, they provide a service. You consume that service and everything that goes with it, the API, a wiki, whatever it happens to be. And this is great. It all comes down to how much your leadership is willing to make that change. I was coaching a year ago now, a UK government department. You would think UK government departments are going to have a lot of bureaucracy in them. I was surprised. What we did with 10 Agile delivery teams, a mixture of Scrum and Kanban, was say, this is kind of coming out of COVID, we'll all come together in London, and we will, based on the kind of pain that we've been observing with our delivery, we'll let you guys structure your own teams. And we'll build those teams around the outcomes that we want from our products. So this was called our Pick Your Own Outcome session. Got all the teams together, the existing teams, and we said, these are the outcomes. This is a set of criteria for the skills that we must have on each team. And by the way, those of you doing Scrum, you can pick your own Scrum Master, not necessarily someone who's already a Scrum Master, which was a bit shocking. And they did this. There was some kind of toing and froing, but they themselves did a team formation exercise. We had a new set of teams, ones that were outcome focused, ones that were fully cross-functional, and ones that were most importantly created by the teams themselves. So they were brought into working in this way because they chose it. So that was a key, kind of surprising for this kind of department that they were working in, a kind of a key result that has made them much more productive, much more trusting in their leadership. So team topologies. One thing you'll find results out of this, when we do a restructuring of teams, if you follow the team topology guidelines, you might find some people who didn't before have any contact with others in that particular development organization, now suddenly some communication pathways have been opened up. Now, we would think that's a good thing. Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. We want to really understand how we want to communicate from one team to another. Look at the platform team concept. They're like an API. We don't necessarily want them, having stand-ups with feature teams every day. That's not the kind of focus we want them to have. So truly understand, if we've got 3 teams that work together on a similar product or service, then sure, they should be communicating. But really understand where the communication is most important, because you can detract from the overall mission. Tooling. Not many people focus on this part of the structure of teams. Do we want procurement departments determining our team structure? Because I've seen this happen. We had teams in a development organization that were told, you have to use Jira. Meanwhile, operations guys, we've done a deal with the ServiceNow sales rep, so we've got ServiceNow in for you guys. Completely different tools, and complete lack of transparency of what's going on. When is my stuff going to get deployed? Well, let me have a look for you. Yeah, complete lack of transparency and understanding. And if we're trying to move to a more, a DevOps-focused delivery organization, your tools can inhibit that. So be very careful which tool sets that you're using, because they influence the structure of your organization. They permeate that throw it over the fence attitude that we see. So yeah, look at that stuff and its effect. So here's our org chart. This org chart does not represent how you actually work together. And value streams, we've mentioned value streams a few times today, but we really want to look at what is the focus for value delivery? From trigger to value delivered to our customer, from soup to nuts, what are all the steps in value delivery? I did some work coaching a UK telecoms company, and they said, Bob, we need you to come in, run a workshop to create our value streams for us. Well, no, you already have your value streams. You want me to help you identify where the hell they are, right? Because they had no clue. They were geographically dispersed. They had teams in the UK, nearshore teams, offshore teams. They did not know where value lied. So we identified that for them. But more importantly, once you've got it, where are all the bottlenecks in your system? Yeah? How can you optimize the flow of system? Beginning of the day, you heard this phrase, yeah? Stop starting, start finishing. Looking at flow. Now, I had an interesting observation today that I've never seen before, and that is a queue for the men's restrooms, but not for the women's. This was an interesting concept for me. And ladies, if you want to know why, they had shut down all the urinals. None at all. Yeah? So the impact of changes within a system is going to have a massive impact on systems thinking, on queuing theory, on the flow of a system. So it's really important to understand why decisions are made and what the impact is on those systems. We've visualized our system, we've got a Kanban system in place, we're trying to understand where to introduce WIP limits, we're trying to understand where to introduce policies in our Kanban system. And at the end of the day, always focus on how we're going to get value to our customer, because that's what we're in this game for. And at scale, it's really difficult. Our customers want something quick. And whenever I run a Scrum course or a Kanban course, and I ask people, what do you think Agile is? Oh, it's going quick. But going quick in the right direction. We want to make sure we're delivering the right stuff for our users. So we need engagement. And engagement at scale is very, very difficult. Obtaining feedback with short feedback cycles at scale is very difficult. We always retrospect. How can we shorten the lead time? How can we shorten the period downstream from development to actually release something? And that results in the kind of most misused term in Agile, in my opinion, which is the minimum viable product, right? I made the mistake of telling my wife a bit about what I do. I got sent to Sainsbury's, which is a UK supermarket, with a minimum viable product of what I had to get. And it's commonly misused. It ends up being something that's done as quick as possible, but is not really very good. Yeah? We want something that is a good product that allows users to do something, but also enables us to get valuable feedback to know, are we going to pivot or persevere onto the next thing? And it's not just about the product. There's been a lot of focus in the last decade or so from moving from project-based organizations to product-based organizations. And this is great. There's a book by Mick Kirsten of the same name, Project to Product. But that's not what it's all about. Jürgen mentioned this morning about experience. We want a kind of consistent experience through all channels to our product from the user. We want a high level of customer satisfaction. We're only going to get that when we do something like implementing an experience crew to ensure that consistency of result. So don't do that. Anybody heard of Lamar's laws? Yeah. I'm not going to run through all of these. The gist of these is middle management are going to get in your way. But it's a nice segue. Culture follows structure that Craig Larman stole from John Seddon is a nice segue to the next bit. We've talked about structure. So let's talk about, you guessed it, culture. Get it? Culture? Culture. We've got, you know, what's visible. We've got the org chart. We've got some roles and tools and stuff. But the important things are below the waterline. They are the kind of sum within our organization of all of our attitudes, all of our actions and the behaviors that result from those actions. And we can't say, as I've heard many leaders say, we want to do this Agile thing, go change your culture. If you could go do that now, that would be great. You can't do that. You have to get people to change behaviors first, and the culture will naturally follow. Now this statement, culture follows structure, this is true for larger companies. If you have, you know, 10 guys in a garage, they will naturally have a culture of working together, and how they work together and that structure will form in the opposite way to this. Yeah, structure follows culture. But in this way, as soon as you get bigger and bigger, you really have to focus on the principles, the tooling, the level of autonomy of your teams in order to get the culture you desire. And you have to measure it. You have to measure how are we doing towards moving that needle to where we have this kind of generative culture of people working together effectively and obtaining the goals that we desire. And a good starting point, we need a compelling vision. And the larger your organization gets, potentially, the more diluted that vision gets as well. So you have to really put in the hard yards to make sure that all parts of your organization get this. Why are we doing something? Simon Sinek wrote a book following his successful TED talk of Start With Why. Excellent book. But it's really true. Leave the how to your teams, but communicate the why with purpose. We want transparency of mission. Transparency of mission, and following that, knowing where we're going, we need to work on trust. Definition of trust for you. The kind of important word here is vulnerability. In teams and interactions between teams and leadership, we need leaders to exhibit some form of vulnerability in order for teams to think, oh, he's really opened himself up to us. I'm going to move slightly towards building some trust in the way that our organizations are working together. One thing that's quite interesting, though, how many of you measure your productivity in some form? Yeah, measuring velocity, you're measuring, yeah. How many of you measure or have metrics associated with trust? Oh, okay, so there's a few. That's unusual, I would say. I mean, maybe we talk about it, maybe we retrospect on it, but actually tracking something that gives us an indication of how trustful or trustworthy our teams are can be very tricky, can be very vague as to are we on the right track or not. A couple of quotes here from Jez Humble, and this is around something that the previous speaker talked about. With trust, we're also talking about alignment. How do we align our teams on a common mission? And half the battle with trust is, where do decisions get made? If you haven't read this book or seen this talk by David Marquet about turning the ship around, that's also an excellent representation of how do we encourage distributed decision-making in organizations. Let's move the decision-making to the teams or to where the best information resides to make those decisions. Now, 2 years ago, when I was speaking at this conference, I had this same slide that was from IBM's Institute for Business Value. And it's 2 years on. So I wonder, I will try and find out if this statement that we'll have 2.5 times more remote workers is true. I imagine it's more than that. And this is where trust is even more important. It's really much more difficult to do that building exercise with virtual teams than it is if we guys are in a room together and we can understand our body languages and our facial expressions. Much more difficult. You really have to put the effort in to get the results that you're looking for. Whoops. A little sensitive. Another topic that gets discussed in Team Topologies' book is this concept of cognitive load. So this is how much you're having to deal with in your working memory. And when we structure teams, there's kind of 3 types of cognitive load that you'll experience. There's intrinsic, which is related to the real main skill set you have, and you want to try and move that from working memory out of working memory with the aid of training and coaching and pairing and all that good stuff. There's also extraneous cognitive load, otherwise known as all the crap we wish we didn't have to do. Yeah, so administrative stuff, overhead, that is detracting from us doing the true value-adding work that we're supposed to be doing. So farm that off. Get other people to do the things that your highly skilled resources don't have to do. And then they can focus on the 3rd kind of cognitive load, which is called germane cognitive load, or applicable or appropriate, if you like. So things like, hey, speaking to customers, understanding the impact of what you're delivering, stuff that's truly value-adding. So this concept of cognitive load, try and understand it within your teams. What's the kind of sum of all of the cognitive load that your team members have, and how can you reduce that? Yeah. Team. It's the unit of delivery. That might seem obvious, but a lot of people get this wrong. They have silos of skill within their team. I've done my bit as a developer. Now you, tester, you do your bit. Yeah, I'm just going to give you as much work as possible. I'm just focused on my own area. Things like introducing WIP limits, yeah, they impact the flow of work, but what they also do is a trigger to say the unit of work is not one person. It's the whole team that we're trying to get over the line. So it influences, ooh, I've hit my WIP limit, developer, I need to go help the tester. It encourages collaborative working. And when we're working at scale, if you don't have a very good team, crap scaled is big crap. So we really want to focus on producing all of the groundwork that enables hyper-performing teams, so we can get a really good team and then we can scale appropriately and we maintain that quality. Very quickly, looking at some scaling frameworks, and you've seen these pictures a few times today. We've got, SAFe over here that I kind of think of as a big bucket of stuff that's taken from other places. So gradually, as you've seen, the versions of SAFe kind of increase over the years. They've introduced Lean Startup, they've introduced Design Thinking. Latest release from SAFe even has Team Topologies in it. So it's really encompassing all the things that are valuable. But you don't have to do all of it. Do what makes sense for you. Some people use SAFe, and it ends up kind of looking like waterfall with lipstick on. Yeah, we want to get the good stuff out of these scaling frameworks. Scrum at Scale, which is the Scrum Inc. scaling offering. They're focused on 2 loops of product and delivery. We've got high-level representation of decision-making of how we implement Agile at the top with our executive action team. And we've got our executive meta-scrum at the top for those guys who are familiar with this, that's responsible for overall product strategy. And their big deal is minimum viable bureaucracy, just enough to scale effectively, measure the right stuff, look at decision latency. How long does it take you once a team raises an impediment that has to go up multiple levels? How long does it take for that to be sorted and the results fed back down to your team? That's a good metric. Then you've got, product-focused frameworks such as LESS that we just heard of, single product, reduce local optimization. Nexus is similar. But Kanban doesn't get mentioned that often as far as scaling frameworks go. And it's very powerful. If you look at upstream Kanban, we're looking at, how do we measure reducing the amount of work in progress, even at a portfolio level. We want to try and reduce the number of in-flight initiatives to really get power and value from what we're delivering. So cool. Click, there we go. Here's a menu for you. These are some things that I want you to consider from what I've just talked about. Take an experiment and try one of these in your environment. And you might be surprised. Yeah? Don't try and do everything. As Kanban method says, start from where you are now. Yeah? Do an evolutionary change process. Thanks, guys. Are there any questions?
Yeah, let's see. Anyone? All right, I have a question then. Is agility more about delivering faster or delivering earlier?
Isn't that the same thing?
No?
If you deliver faster, you're delivering earlier. Do you want to expand on the question a little?
Oh, well, you can type keyboard faster. You can run faster. You can ask people to work overtime.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think from the perspective of working faster, obviously, if you look at Agile Manifesto, that's saying, hey, in order to have effective teams, and in order to have effective teams at scale, we want to have a sustainable pace for doing something. So we want our developers and our testers and our analysts to understand the kind of balance of this is the demand of work coming in, and this is our capacity to be able to meet that demand. I think the main thing is doing the right stuff. We did some work for a health organization in the UK for the last couple of years, and they said, right, we really need this thing. This is really urgent. It's absolutely critical. We need you guys to work on this next 2 weeks. We have to have results. People worked nights and weekends, and they did it. And then the client said, actually, that's not so important anymore. Do something else. And that's a real killer. So making sure that you have commitment, from your teams that they're going to deliver, but also from your clients that if we do deliver, you're actually going to do something with it. Did that kind of answer the question?
All right. Anyone else? Okay, Victoras.
Got some time. Hi there. So first of all, thank you for a good presentation. And when you were talking about trust, you asked, do people measure trust? How do you do that? How is it even possible? I agree that trust is like base of everything in life and in work. How do you do it?
I mean, there's various ways you could cut this, but what we're trying to understand is from a team perspective, the same as we would try and measure with customers. We could do, for example, a net promoter score within our team. From a trusting perspective, would you recommend working in this team to others? And that can be done anonymously, because a lot of the times teams are not going to want to be, especially if there's a lack of trust, they're not going to want to be open about this stuff. Also, I think you need coaching that's effective, that really understands how a team is feeling just from the interactions, And then when you come to, for example, retrospect, you can kind of steer your team in one particular direction to get them to open up and talk about this stuff. It's like everything with Agile, everything that we're doing today, it's all about the discussion. If we can get that, then things can only improve.
Bob Willis, ladies and
Cool.
gentlemen, round of applause.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Okay. Cheers. Oh, thank you.
Right, folks, so we're gonna have a closing keynote in about 5 minutes, maybe 6, maybe 7. We're gonna be flexible about the start time. So take your time, be ready, be back, and very exciting to have a closing.